Far across the galaxy, on a distant planet called Arcari, something terrible was happening. The once great empire, known for its towering cities and advanced technology, was now falling apart. The air was thick and polluted, making it hard to breathe. The oceans that once teemed with life had dried up, and the crops that fed the population had withered away. The Arcari people had no more resources. Their advanced machines, once able to solve any problem, now stood silent and useless. They had tried everything. Every attempt to fix their world had failed. Desperation had set in. The Arcari leaders, a proud species, had reached out to their neighbors for help. They had sent out signals, hoping that someone, anyone, would respond. The Xantorians, a race of brilliant scientists, had been the first to receive the message. But they ignored it. The Velezi, known for their peaceful nature, were next. They too turned away, fearing that helping the Arcari would bring too many dangers. Even the callous, mysterious, and powerful beings refused to lend a hand. They believed that every civilization must face its own challenges. The Arcari had no choice but to find their own way, or so it seemed. But then the humans heard the call. Far from the galactic center, Earth was a young planet, just beginning to explore the stars. Humanity had not yet reached the same level of technology as the older civilizations, but they were ambitious. They had risen from humble beginnings and built a strong, united world. They had learned from their past mistakes and made incredible advances in technology. More importantly, they had something the other races did not: a fierce determination to help others. The United Earth Alliance, made up of all the nations on Earth, had been monitoring the radio waves from deep space. They intercepted the Arcari's distress signal, and after much debate, the decision was made. Humanity would respond. They would send a fleet of ships to help the Arcari. Not everyone agreed with the decision. Many feared that the journey would be too dangerous. Others worried about the cost. Some believed it was foolish to waste resources on a lost cause. But the leaders of Earth were firm. "We cannot turn our backs on those in need," said President Elena Reyes. "Humanity has been given a chance to show what we are made of. We must not waste it." The people of Earth were divided, but most rallied behind their leaders. It was a bold move, one that many saw as a chance for humanity to prove its worth in the galaxy. After all, while the older civilizations had the wisdom of the ages, humanity had something they did not: a heart full of hope and a belief that nothing was impossible. Preparations began immediately. The United Earth Alliance launched the Resolute, a state-of-the-art starship, and sent out the call for volunteers. Engineers, biologists, doctors, and experts in various fields signed up. They knew that the journey would take years, and the risks were high, but they were driven by the idea that they could make a difference. On the day of departure, Earth's atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Crowds gathered at spaceports around the world to watch as the Resolute lifted off. The starship, sleek and powerful, carried the hopes of billions with it. As it soared into space, a sense of unity filled the people of Earth. This was not just a mission to save another world. It was a mission to show the galaxy who humanity really was. The journey ahead was long. The Resolute would travel through unexplored regions of space, facing cosmic anomalies, dangerous storms, and unpredictable hazards. But the crew was ready. They were determined to succeed, to show the galaxy that Earth's people were not just a footnote in the history of the universe. They were here to stay, and they would not give up on the Arcari, no matter how difficult the task seemed. As the Resolute continued its journey, the crew kept their eyes on the stars, knowing that their mission would change the fate of an entire civilization. And while the Arcari waited, unsure if help would ever arrive, they had no idea that the humans, who had so much less than the other civilizations, were the ones who had chosen to stand by them. The Resolute was the most advanced starship ever built by humanity, but even it faced challenges on its long journey through the stars. As the ship sped through space, crossing vast distances, and passing by strange celestial bodies, The crew members had plenty of time to reflect on the mission they had set out on. It was not just a journey to another planet. It was a journey to change the fate of an entire species. Captain David Harris stood on the bridge, looking out through the wide observation windows. The stars stretched out endlessly before him, their lights seeming to reach across time itself. The mission was important, but there were moments when it felt almost impossible. How could humanity, still new to the stars, help a dying civilization? Yet every time doubt crept into his mind. He would think about the people of Earth and their decision to help the Arcari. Humanity had chosen to step up, and now they had to see it through. Behind him, his officers worked tirelessly, monitoring the ship's systems, making sure everything was running smoothly. Lieutenant Sarah Lynn, the chief engineer, was the first to notice a problem. "Captain, we've detected some unusual fluctuations in the ship's energy core," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "It's nothing major yet, but we'll need to make repairs." Captain Harris nodded. "Get to it, Sarah. We can't afford any delays. We're on a tight schedule." As the crew scrambled to solve the issue, the passengers aboard the ship, hundreds of volunteers, experts, and civilians, kept busy with their own work. There was little to do during the long stretches of travel, but there was still a feeling of unity among them. No one was there just for the adventure. Everyone was there for the same reason: to help the Arcari. Dr. Emma Ruse, a biologist, spent most of her time in the ship's lab, preparing for the work she would do on Arcari. She had studied the planet's climate, its once thriving ecosystems, and the challenges they would face in trying to restore it. "The planet is in worse shape than we expected," she told her colleague, Dr. Raj Patel. "The damage to the soil and atmosphere is extensive. It will take years to bring it back to life, even with all our resources." Dr. Patel looked out at the stars. "But we have to try. The Arcari have been abandoned by everyone else. If we don't do this, who will?" Their conversations were a reminder of the importance of the mission. It wasn't just about fixing a broken planet. It was about giving the Arcari a chance at survival. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity cared. As days turned into weeks, the crew settled into a routine. Everyone worked together, preparing for what lay ahead. The ship's advanced systems helped keep them in top shape, but the journey was still exhausting. Time seemed to stretch on forever. The endless darkness of space was punctuated only by the occasional flash of a distant star or the sight of an asteroid belt. It was both beautiful and lonely. One of the most difficult parts of the journey was knowing that the Arcari didn't believe help was coming. Their last communication had been weeks ago, and there was still no sign of any response. The human crew had received only one brief message from the Arcari leadership: "Do not come. There is no hope for us." That message weighed heavily on Captain Harris. He knew the Arcari had given up on themselves. But what the Arcari didn't know was that humanity had never given up on anyone. The humans weren't just coming to provide technology and supplies. They were coming to restore hope. The crew's determination never wavered. They knew that once they arrived, the real work would begin. They would have to build trust with the Arcari, show them that help had arrived, and begin the difficult task of restoring their world. But more than that, they would have to prove that the Arcari were not alone in the galaxy, that there was still hope for the future. Days turned into months, and the Resolute finally crossed into the Arcari system. As they approached the planet, the crew began to prepare for landing. Tensions were high. Would the Arcari accept their help, or would they turn the humans away like all the other civilizations had done? Captain Harris stood in the briefing room, addressing his team. "We've come a long way, and we're almost there. We don't know how the Arcari will respond, but we do know one thing. We're here for them. We will not leave until we've done everything we can." There was a murmur of agreement from the crew. They had spent months in deep space, facing challenges that most people could never imagine. Now, they were on the brink of something incredible. "Prepare for landing," Captain Harris ordered. "Let's show the Arcari that they haven't been forgotten." The ship's engines roared to life as it began its descent toward the dying world of Arkari. Outside the ship's windows, the planet loomed large, its atmosphere thick and clouded, a reminder of how much work lay ahead. But for the first time in a long while, the people aboard the Resolute felt something they hadn't felt during the long journey. Hope. They had come to save the Arkari, and they would not stop until they had. As the Resolute touched down on the surface of Arkari, a feeling of anticipation filled the air. The ship's landing gear settled onto the cracked and dry ground, sending up clouds of dust. Captain Harris watched through the window, his heart beating faster. This was it, the moment that would define their mission. The Arkari's homeworld was nothing like Earth. Once a vibrant and lush planet, it now looked like a shadow of its former self. The skies were a sickly yellow, and the land was barren, with only sparse patches of dead grass and brown earth. There were no bustling cities, no signs of life. The once great capital was a ghost town, its buildings crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. The humans had arrived to help, but they knew it wouldn't be easy. The Arkari had lived through years of hardship, and their pride had been deeply wounded. They had sent out the call for help, but it was clear that they were not ready to trust anyone, least of all, a new species like humans. Captain Harris stood in front of his team, his voice steady but filled with resolve. This is not just a mission to save their planet. It's a mission to rebuild their hope. We may be strangers to them, but we are here for one reason: to help them. Remember that. Dr. Emma Ruiz, the biologist, was already preparing her equipment for the planet's harsh environment. She had studied the Arkari's ecosystem before the mission, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality. The air was thin and polluted, and the soil was hard and dry. It would take years of careful work to restore life to this world. But Emma had seen Earth face similar challenges, and she knew that humanity had the ability to adapt. "We've got a lot of work ahead," she said, looking out at the desolate landscape. "But if we take it one step at a time, we can make a difference." The first meeting with the Arkari was brief, but it set the tone for the rest of the mission. A small group of Arkari representatives arrived at the landing site, their forms tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and silver eyes. They were guarded, their faces stern, as if they expected the humans to be no different from the other civilizations that had turned their backs on them. Captain Harris and his team approached with caution, knowing that the Arkari were not in the mood for empty promises. The humans had no intention of making empty promises. They had come to show the Arkari what they could do, not just in words, but in action. One of the Arkari leaders, a tall figure named Chorus, stepped forward. His voice was cold and distant, his eyes narrow. "You are too late," he said. "Our world is dying. There is nothing you can do to save us." Captain Harris looked Chorus in the eye. "We didn't come here to give up on you. We've seen what you've been through, and we believe it's possible to restore this planet. But we need your help. We can't do it alone." For a moment, there was silence. The Arkari leader studied the humans, unsure of what to make of them. The humans had shown up, despite the warnings. They had arrived with hope, not with threats or demands. That alone was something new. Finally, Chorus spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Why would you help us? We are nothing more than a dying species. What do you hope to gain from this?" Emma stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We don't expect anything in return. We are not here for power or resources. We are here because we believe that every life is worth saving. We believe that you, the Arkari, have value. You have a rich history, and your people deserve a future. We want to help you have that future." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, the Arkari seemed to hesitate. Chorus looked at the humans, then at the ruined planet around him. His people had been abandoned by everyone else, but here were the humans, young, full of energy and determination, offering a hand in friendship. Could they really do it? Could they restore their world? After a long pause, Chorus nodded. "We will give you a chance. But know this, if you fail, there will be no hope left for us." Captain Harris nodded in return. "We won't fail. We promise." And so, the humans began their work. The first task was to assess the damage to the planet's atmosphere and soil. Dr. Ruiz and her team set up makeshift laboratories and began testing samples from the ground. The air quality was poor, and the soil was toxic, but the humans weren't discouraged. They had brought advanced technology with them, and they would begin by purifying the air and starting small environmental projects to restore the balance. Meanwhile, the engineers began repairing what they could. The Arcari's once advanced machinery had fallen into disrepair, but humanity's engineers were experts at finding creative solutions. They worked side by side with the Arcari, sharing knowledge and learning from each other. The humans had made the first step in building trust, but there was still so much to do. The Arcari had lived through years of isolation, and it would take time for them to believe that help had truly arrived. But the humans were in no hurry. They knew that every small success would build toward a larger one. And with every passing day, the hope that had once seemed lost began to grow again, not just on the planet of Arcari, but in the hearts of its people. The days turned into weeks, and slowly but surely, the humans' efforts began to show results. The first signs of progress on Arcari were small, but to the people of the planet, they were nothing short of miraculous. The air, once thick with pollutants, began to clear in certain areas. The plants, though still fragile, started to show signs of life. Green shoots poked through the cracked soil, proof that recovery was possible. Dr. Emma Ruiz couldn't contain her excitement when she saw the first green sprout in one of the soil samples. "This is it," she said to her colleague, Dr. Rajpatel. "We're making a difference. It's not much yet, but it's a start." Raj smiled, though his eyes showed the exhaustion of long days. "It's more than we hoped for. If we can keep this up, maybe we can restore their world." The team worked tirelessly, focusing on everything from purifying the atmosphere to improving the water supply. But it wasn't just the environment that needed healing. The people of Arcari also had to heal. For years, they had lived with the belief that no one cared about them, that they were alone in the universe. Now in front of them, the humans were showing them a different reality. They had arrived not as conquerors, but as friends. The relationship between the humans and the Arcari was still fragile. Though the Arcari had agreed to work with the humans, many of them were still skeptical. Some of the older Arcari leaders, like Chorus, had been so deeply hurt by the past betrayals that they found it hard to believe anything could be done to save their people. Captain Harris understood the distrust. He had seen it before. When people were hurt, it was hard to trust again. But he was determined to prove that the humans had come with only the best of intentions. Slowly, he worked to build relationships with the Arcari leaders, speaking with them, sharing knowledge, and offering support. One day, after a long discussion with Chorus, Captain Harris stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, watching the sun set over the planet's barren surface. It was still a world in crisis, but the small changes they had made gave him hope. He turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Sarah Lynn, who stood beside him. "It's not much, but it's something," Captain Harris said. "We've only just begun, but there's hope now. That's more than the Arcari had before we came." Sarah nodded, her face serious. "I think the hardest part is yet to come. We've earned their trust for now, but can we keep it? Can we really restore their world and their hope?" Captain Harris took a deep breath. "We have to. There's no turning back now. We came here to help, and that's exactly what we'll do, no matter how long it takes." Meanwhile, on the ground, the humans and the Arcari were working side by side, their efforts growing more coordinated with each passing day. Arcari engineers, who had once been experts in creating complex technologies, began working with the humans to repair some of their old machinery. The humans taught them new techniques, and the Arcari shared their knowledge of the planet's unique characteristics. It was a true exchange of ideas and skills. One of the biggest challenges was the water supply. The rivers of Arcari had long since dried up, leaving behind only cracked earth and dust. The humans had brought advanced technology with them, machines capable of extracting water from the atmosphere. But it was a delicate process. The machines needed constant adjustments and care to work properly in such a harsh environment. Dr. Ruiz spent hours alongside Arcari scientists, fine-tuning the machines. Though it was frustrating at times, she never gave up. "We're this close," she said to her team one evening. "I can feel it. Soon, we'll have water flowing again." The breakthrough came when the first drops of water began to fall from the machines, filling a reservoir that had been empty for years. The Arcari watched in disbelief, their faces filled with awe. For the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to hope. The humans had done it. Something they thought impossible was now happening before their eyes. The small victories were piling up, and with each success, the trust between the Arcari and the humans grew. It was not an overnight change, but it was real. The Arcari started to realize that humanity had come to help, not to conquer. It was a lesson they had forgotten, but one they were beginning to relearn. Chorus, once so bitter and doubtful, now walked among the human workers with a quiet respect. He had seen the humans' commitment and their results, and his heart had softened. He still carried the scars of his people's past, but he began to understand that the humans' presence was not a threat. It was an opportunity. One evening, as the humans gathered around a campfire near the restored water source, Chorus approached Captain Harris. He looked out at the gathered crowd, Arcari and humans, working together toward a common goal. "You were right," Chorus said, his voice rough with emotion. "You told us that we weren't alone. I see it now. You've given us something we lost long ago. Hope." Captain Harris smiled, the weight of the mission still heavy on his shoulders, but lighter than it had been before. "We didn't come to give you hope, Chorus. We came to help you find it again. And we'll keep helping you, every step of the way." The fire crackled in the background as the two men stood there in silence. The path ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time, both the humans and the Arcari knew that they were not alone. Together, they would rebuild, and together, they would face the future. As the weeks passed, the relationship between the humans and the Arcari continued to grow. The work on the planet was slow but steady, and the Arcari were beginning to see the fruits of their labor. There were more patches of green spreading across the land, and the water supply was improving. The air was cleaner, and small animals were beginning to return to the planet's surface. The signs of life were small, but they were enough to keep everyone motivated. Captain Harris stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, watching the planet below. The skies, once yellow and polluted, were now tinged with the soft hues of blue and purple as the atmosphere slowly healed. For the first time since they had arrived, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. It had been a long, difficult journey, but the results were starting to show. "You're thinking about how far we've come, aren't you?" Lieutenant Sarah Lynn asked, standing beside him. Captain Harris nodded. "It's hard not to. It's still a long road ahead, but seeing the changes, no matter how small, gives me hope. I think the Arcari are starting to believe again." Sarah smiled. It's been a hard road for them. For so long, they've lived in fear of extinction. They'd forgotten what it's like to have hope. Captain Harris turned to face her. "That's exactly why we're here. To remind them that they're not alone. To show them that there's always hope, as long as we keep fighting for it." Sarah nodded in agreement. "It's amazing how much we've accomplished together. The Arcari have so much knowledge about their world. They just needed someone to believe in them." Just then, the communication officer entered the room. "Captain, we have a message from the Arcari leadership. They wish to meet with you." Captain Harris raised an eyebrow. "What's this about?" "I'm not sure, sir. They didn't give any details, but it sounds important." Captain Harris nodded. "All right, let's go see what they have to say." The meeting was held in one of the newly restored buildings in the Arcari capital. The humans and the Arcari gathered in a large open hall. The walls, once cracked and crumbling, had been repaired and were now sturdy enough to support the weight of the future. Chorus, the leader of the Arcari, stood at the front of the room. His expression was serious, but there was a new light in his eyes, something that had been missing before. The mistrust and anger that had once defined him were no longer as strong. Now, there was cautious optimism. "Captain Harris," Chorus began, his voice strong, but not without emotion. "When you first arrived, I was skeptical. I did not believe that you could save us. My people had been abandoned by others before. I thought there was no hope for us." Captain Harris stood tall, his voice steady. "We didn't come here to save you. We came here to help you save yourselves. And we'll keep helping, no matter what it takes." Chorus nodded slowly. "And that is why we are here today. We have seen the work you have done. We have seen the changes. It is not enough to restore our planet. It is not enough to bring our people back. But it is a start, and we are ready to do our part. We are ready to help." The room went silent. The Arcari leaders had always been proud and independent. To hear them say they were ready to work alongside the humans in such a way was a huge shift. It was a sign that they were beginning to trust the humans, not just as outsiders, but as true partners in rebuilding their world. Captain Harris felt a wave of pride. "That's all we can ask for," he said. "We'll work together, side by side, and we'll restore this planet. Together, we'll rebuild what was lost." Chorus stepped forward, his posture straight and proud. "We have also discussed something else. Our people have been scattered across the planet. Many of us live in isolated communities, far from the cities. But we understand now that we must unite. If we are to rebuild, we must do it together. We need to come together as a single people." Captain Harris looked at him with admiration. "I think that's the right decision. Unity is strength, and we will be here to support you every step of the way." The meeting continued and plans were made for the future. The Arcari would begin relocating their people to the restored cities. The humans would assist with the logistics, helping to ensure that the migration went smoothly. It was a difficult task, but everyone knew that it had to be done. The first step in uniting the Arcari was to bring them together physically. The next step was to bring them together emotionally and mentally, to make them believe in the future they were building. Over the next few months, the teamwork between the humans and the Arcari became even stronger. The Arcari taught the humans about their culture, their history, and their ways of life. The humans shared their knowledge, their technology, and their hope. It was a true exchange of ideas and values, and it made both species stronger. Captain Harris often found himself reflecting on how much had changed. When they had first arrived, the Arcari had been a broken people, clinging to the belief that they were beyond saving. Now they were working together to restore their world, united by a shared goal. One evening, as the sun set over the planet, Captain Harris stood with Chorus on a hill overlooking the city. The lights of the newly restored buildings flickered in the distance, and the sounds of laughter and conversation could be heard from below. "We've come a long way," Captain Harris said, his voice filled with pride. Chorus nodded. "Yes, we have. And we still have much to do. But for the first time in a long while, I can see a future for my people." Captain Harris smiled. "A future that we'll build together." And with that, the two leaders stood side by side, looking out at the world they had started to rebuild, a world where hope, once lost, had been found again. The days on Arcari grew warmer as the planet's environment began to show more signs of recovery. The once dying world now buzzed with life. Small animals returned to the forests, and the rivers that had once run dry were slowly filling again. The air was clearer, and the fields, once barren, were now dotted with the green of new crops and plants. There was still much work to be done, but progress was undeniable. Captain Harris stood at the edge of a newly restored field, watching as Arcari workers planted seeds alongside the humans. It was a peaceful sight. one that spoke of cooperation, unity, and hope. The Arcari had finally begun to embrace the help that the humans had offered, and in return, they shared their knowledge of the planet's ecosystems and farming methods. Together, they were creating something that would last for generations. "We've come a long way," Lieutenant Sarah Lynn said as she joined him, a smile on her face. "It's incredible to see how much they've accomplished." "It feels like a dream, doesn't it?" Captain Harris nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "It does. When we first arrived, it seemed like a mission we could never complete. But now I believe we can do it." Sarah looked at him. "You really think we can restore this planet? I mean, not just the land, but the people?" Captain Harris turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "I do. It won't be easy, but it's possible. The Arcari are strong. They've been through so much, and they're still standing. Now they're starting to believe in themselves again. That's the most important part." They both watched as the Arcari worked alongside the humans, their movements coordinated and confident. It wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges ahead, but the atmosphere was filled with a sense of purpose and determination. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the fields, Captain Harris felt a sense of contentment. There was still much to do, but he knew that humanity's role in helping the Arcari was far from over. They had already achieved more than anyone could have imagined when they first arrived. The key now was to keep pushing forward, to continue building the future that both species deserved. That night, in the heart of the newly restored city, the humans and the Arcari gathered together for a celebration. It wasn't a grand event, but it was a moment of recognition for the progress they had made. Tables were filled with food, and there was music and laughter in the air. It was a simple gathering, but it was more meaningful than any grand celebration could ever be. Chorus, the leader of the Arcari, stood at the front of the gathering. He had come to respect the humans for their efforts, their patience, and their unwavering belief that things could improve. His people had once lived in isolation, believing that their fate was sealed. But now, they were united with the humans, working toward a common goal. "I want to thank you all," Chorus began, his voice strong but filled with emotion. "When you first came to us, we were broken. We didn't believe there was hope left for our people, but you showed us otherwise. You didn't just offer us help, you offered us a chance to rebuild, to recover, and to live again." He paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "And for that, we will be forever grateful. We are no longer alone. We have learned that when we work together, there is nothing we cannot achieve." The crowd fell silent, and then a wave of applause filled the air. Captain Harris stood at the back of the crowd, his heart swelling with pride. It had been a long road, but seeing the Arcari begin to believe in their own future was the greatest reward of all. Sarah stood beside him, her eyes shining. "This is what it's all about. This is why we came here." Captain Harris smiled. "Yes, it is. This is just the beginning." The next day, the humans and the Arcari met to discuss the next phase of the rebuilding efforts. They had made incredible progress, but there was still much to be done. The environment had improved, but the cities needed restoration, and the economy had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Dr. Emma Ruiz, the biologist, stood with a group of Arcari scientists, discussing the new crops they had been growing. "We're going to need more advanced agricultural techniques if we're going to feed everyone," she said. "The soil's improving, but it still has a long way to go. We're going to need a lot of help." One of the Arcari scientists, a young woman named Holly, nodded. "We have always known how to grow our food, but we will need your technology to help speed things up. We want to learn from you." Dr. Ruiz smiled. "That's what we're here for. We'll teach you everything we know, and in return, we'll learn from you too." Across the room, Captain Harris sat with Chorus and the other Arcari leaders, discussing the long-term plans for the planet's future. It was clear that the Arcari were ready to take responsibility for their own future. They had regained their sense of purpose and were eager to work alongside the humans to make their planet thrive once more. "I think we're ready for the next step," Captain Harris said. "We'll help with the cities, but you're going to have to take the lead. This is your planet. We're just here to help you rebuild it." Chorus looked at him, his expression resolute. "We know that, and we will, but we will never forget what you've done for us." As the meeting came to an end, Captain Harris looked around the room. The Arcari were no longer a broken people. They were a people with a future, a people who had found hope once again. And as he looked out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise, Captain Harris knew one thing for sure. The journey was far from over. But with the Arcari by their side, humanity had found a new mission, one that would last for generations to come. The days of rebuilding were long, but the rewards were evident in every passing moment. The planet of Arcari, once on the brink of collapse, was beginning to thrive again. The forests grew denser, the rivers ran clear, and the air was filled with the hum of life returning to the land. Small animals played in the grass, and the sky, once clouded with pollution, was now clear and blue. Captain Harris stood at the edge of a large river that flowed through the heart of the new city. The water was clean and sparkling, a stark contrast to the dry, cracked earth that had once been the norm. He took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air. He had spent so much time focusing on the mission, on the task ahead, that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely again. "You look like you found a moment of peace, Captain," Lieutenant Sarah Lynn said, joining him at the riverbank. Captain Harris smiled. "It's hard not to, with all this beauty around us. It feels like we've finally made a difference." Sarah glanced at the bustling city behind them, where humans and Arcari worked side by side, building new homes, planting new crops, and creating a future together. "It's incredible. The Arcari are rebuilding their cities, and they're doing it with such determination. I never thought we'd see this day." Captain Harris nodded. "I didn't either. But the Arcari are stronger than we gave them credit for. They've shown the world what it means to survive, to rebuild, and to hope again." Just then, a voice called out from behind them. "Captain, Lieutenant." Dr. Ruiz greeted them with a warm smile. "I have something you'll want to see." They followed Dr. Ruiz to a nearby building, where a group of Arcari scientists had gathered. In the center of the room, a large monitor displayed the results of their latest project, a sustainable energy solution for the planet. For years, the Arcari had relied on outdated, inefficient power sources. But now, with the help of human technology, they had created a new system that harnessed the power of the wind and the sun, providing clean, renewable energy for the entire planet. "We've done it," Dr. Ruiz said, her voice filled with excitement. "This is going to change everything. No more pollution. No more reliance on harmful power sources. This is the future." Captain Harris stepped forward, his eyes scanning the screen. "This is incredible. You've given the Arcari a true gift." Tali, the young Arcari scientist who had worked closely with the humans, smiled shyly. "It's not just us. We worked together. The humans brought us the technology, but we've adapted it to our needs. It's a partnership, just like everything else we've done." Captain Harris felt a swell of pride. The Arcari were no longer just the recipients of help. They were partners in every sense of the word. They had learned, adapted, and taken control of their own future, and the humans had been there to guide them, to support them, every step of the way. As the months passed, the Arcari and humans continued to work together, each contributing their knowledge and skills to the task at hand. The cities flourished, the economy grew, and the Arcari people regained their sense of pride. They were no longer a broken species. They were a thriving civilization, capable of achieving great things. One evening, Chorus invited Captain Harris and his team to a celebration in the heart of the new capital. The city, once empty and crumbling, was now alive with the sounds of music, laughter, and conversation. It was a gathering like no other, a symbol of the unity between the humans and the Arcari. Chorus stood at the front of the crowd, his voice clear and strong as he addressed the gathering. When we first met the humans, we were lost. We had no hope. Our planet was dying, and we believed there was no way out. But they showed us something we had forgotten. They showed us that there is always a way forward, as long as we are willing to work together. The crowd fell silent as Chorus continued. We are here today because of that partnership. We are here today because the humans did not turn away when we needed help. And now we stand together, ready to build a future, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that will come after us. The crowd erupted in applause, and Captain Harris felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had done it. They had not only saved a dying planet, they had given a people a chance to thrive once more. Later that evening, as the celebrations continued, Captain Harris stood at the edge of the city, looking out at the horizon. The stars twinkled overhead, and the lights of the city shone brightly below. It was a peaceful, beautiful sight, a sight that had seemed impossible just a few short years ago. Sarah joined him, her eyes also gazing out at the world they had helped rebuild. "It's incredible, isn't it?" she said softly. "We've changed everything. We've given them a future." Captain Harris nodded. "We didn't do it alone, though. The Arcari worked with us every step of the way. They found their strength again. We just helped them see it." Sarah smiled. "You're right. It's not just about saving a planet. It's about helping a people find their way again." As they stood together, looking at the world they had helped rebuild, Captain Harris knew that this mission had changed him in ways he could never fully explain. It wasn't just the planet that had been saved, it was the people. And that, he thought, was the greatest victory of all. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter that night, as if the universe itself was watching, and for the first time in a long while, Captain Harris felt like they had truly made a difference in the galaxy.